Well, thank you so much. And thank you, everyone that has joined and those that are still popping on. It's bittersweet. We're really excited about what we have to share today. And we're also a little sad. It'll be the last one that we're sharing in this series, but we think that you'll find it very beneficial. Let me go ahead and share my screen. And I'll also make sure I am sharing sound today because we have a very special guest that is going to join us. So let me get there. All right, we'll share it. And let's go full screen here. All right. So we are dealing with creating a culture of compassion. And just a reminder, we have no actual or potential conflict of interest regarding this program or presentation. Excuse me, my eyes are watering. Love allergy season. All right. Acknowledgement. Compassion and integrity training was developed with Drs. Michael Carlin and Brenda Oswowski under Life University. So I want to acknowledge them. All right. Today, we are dealing with a little bit of Series 2 and Series 3. We've already gone through calming body and mind and empathic concern. Today, we're going to really dive a bit more deeply into compassion, appreciating interdependence, and engaging with discernment. So compassion, as we always have started, we're starting there. Compassion is defined in our place as the wish to alleviate the suffering of another. And this definition is so critical because compassion is a motivator. It's a desire. It's a wish. And as we'll see, it's important to have compassion guiding our actual actions. So this is one of my favorite moments in the CIT course. And it's the moment where we discover that compassion is biologically based. Let me go back. I thought we had a little thing at the bottom there. A lot of folks think that compassion is something that, is mushy or soft or something that only advanced civilization does. But really, the reality and the research shows us that we evolved to be more compassionate. And in fact, the more collaborative we have become, the more our survival rate has increased and the better we have done just as an organism. So compassion is, in fact, biologically based. And I think Paige will add a little bit more onto that when she takes over in a moment. All right. So this part, what's happening here? What do you see on the screen? A lot of folks in our classes have given us interesting responses. What this is intended to highlight, though, is the thinking trap of in-group bias. And so what is an in-group? An in-group is the folks you feel associated with. It could be your religious affiliation, your political party, your ethnicity, your gender, or your organization. We tend to extend grace to those that are in our in-group, and we tend to show more care and more compassion to those in our in-group. And so that's great because we need to take care of each other. The challenge comes when someone is not part of our in-group. And so how do we learn to extend compassion to those outside of our in-group? How do we extend compassion to those that aren't like us? I love this image. Two totally different species, right? Individuals you wouldn't expect to necessarily be kind to one another, but here they are. And I love that these are babies because babies seem to get this compassion thing. Again, reminding us that compassion is innate. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Paige.
Thanks, Will. So Will already talked about this thinking trap. So how we define thinking traps are the ways that sometimes the way that we are biologically hardwired can get in our way, right? So some of how we view the world and how we act in certain situations are evolution speaking up. And so when we understand these thinking traps, when we understand how our brain can sort of divert us from, success or an outcome in a situation that we want to have, the more we know about this, the more we can do better, right? The more we can think about it and counteract it. So Another thinking trap is, we're going to talk about two more and then kind of like how do we counteract this, right? So another one is called powerlessness. So has anyone just felt completely overwhelmed by what's going on in our society today, or maybe the last year, or maybe the last year before that? Yeah, thank you. And it's like, what can I do, right? So again, I'll talk a little bit about how to counteract that, but just keep these thinking traps in mind, right? So the in-group bias, powerlessness, feeling like we can't take action in a situation. And then this third one that I want to talk about. So Will, if you can push our slide forward, por favor, is, yes, thank you. So compassion as a weakness. Right? So that's going to be our thinking trap. So we're going to flip it and talk about compassion as a strength. So if we look at this one person in this image, this is a really powerful image. So these were the student-led protests in Tiananmen Square. I think it was in the year 1989. And this one person, in solidarity with the students, walked out and stood in front of these tanks and blocked a whole column of tanks. Does that seem weak? No, right? That takes a lot of courage. That's a very brave act. So I challenge you as you go forward, Will and I both challenge you, as you go forward from these conversations, how do you see compassion showing up in the world as a strength? Because I think how we maybe have traditionally talked about compassion is this idea of, oh, you're going to get steamrolled, right? Or you're a doormat and you're just nice to everybody and you let people get away with stuff. And so we're trying to change that mindset, because actually to really act out of compassion can mean maybe sensing what people need versus what they want versus what they ask for in a moment, right? Maybe it means saying no when it's hard. Maybe it means saying yes when it's hard. So just think about these moments that you've had in your life where you have seen compassion show up as really, a brave, courageous act. And it does take a lot of strength. Okay, so let's move on. So we've got, on this slide there, compassion as a weakness is our thinking trap. All right, so we're going to break down some of these parts into components to explain a little bit more about what all this means. Because again, Will and I have talked about, that word compassion can feel very nebulous, right? What does it mean? How do I act upon it? So according to this model, you can think about three components. So the first one is just noticing that someone is suffering. It's really easy to notice if someone is bleeding, or if they broke a bone and the bone is sticking out, or if someone's crying. Right? Those are easy ways to notice that someone is suffering. There are a lot of ways that people are suffering that we can't notice. So just challenging yourself to keep in mind, there's a lot of inward suffering. People are going through a lot of stuff at any given time. So how can we just notice what people are going through? Maybe they're a little bit quieter. Maybe they talk really quickly because they're feeling anxious or unsure. So once we notice, that's not enough though, because I could be like, oh, okay, that person's bleeding. Let me go on with my day, right? So we notice, but then maybe we should care. Maybe we should do something. So to get to that path of do something, our second step is experiencing empathic concern. So we talked a lot about empathic concern in the last session 2 weeks ago. So there's a video on that if you missed it and you want to catch up. But essentially what we're talking about here is resonating, right? Resonating with what someone else is feeling in a moment. And so when we resonate with someone else, we can start to care. And when we can start to care, we can feel compassion towards someone. So that leads us to our third step, which is a sense of agency. So what we mean by agency in this context is feeling self-confident enough to do something, feeling like we have power to do something. So if we take the converse, and this is when I said, keep in mind that thinking trap of powerlessness can lead to apathy, unfortunately, right? So we see suffering. We may be doing step number 1 of just noticing suffering. Maybe step number 2, we care, but then it can lead to apathy, right? Not doing anything, because we say, well, who am I to make change in this world? So again, we challenge you to say, who am I not? Right? Who are you not to make change? We all can make change. And agency can be so small. It can be the smallest gesture, and it can be so big, right? So there's many different types of feeling and showing compassion. So we're going to talk about this idea of compassion as two wings of a bird. So we've got this gorgeous owl staring at us in this picture. And just like how a bird needs two wings to be able to fly, we would like to explain to you that just compassion in a situation is not enough. And you need also discernment, or what we may also define as wisdom. And that can show up through asking questions of other people, doing a whole lot of listening, creating partnerships in the community, reading, educating yourself, etc. So why we are talking about this other wing of the bird as discernment, as wisdom, is because if we solely rely on compassion, we could, and probably have at one point or another, we all have probably made a decision that we thought could help, and it ends up hurting. Or maybe it helps the one person. Maybe we see one person suffering and we take action out of compassion, and we haven't realized that now 5 other people are going to suffer because of that action that we took. So again, it's taking all those steps to get to that feeling of compassion. And then when we get to I want to do something, I want to take action. Now, how can I lean into my discernment? How can I lean into wisdom? Well, I'll give you a 4-part model on how to do that. We happen to have some slides on it. So this is taken, a lot of this model is taken from the Dalai Lama in some of his texts that he has written. So just acknowledgement where credit is due. So the first step is to check your motivation. Do I have the other person's well-being in mind? We talked about empathic distress before. So that means I'm stressed that other people are suffering. So I'm going to take the path to alleviate my own stress in that moment. But we want to make sure, if we're engaging with a discernment, that we are really thinking about everybody else's well-being. If we can't, right? So everyone knows about compassion fatigue probably in this space. So again, always when it's appropriate. Then when we can check our motivations and say, okay, I've got, this other person's well-being or this other system's well-being in mind. Our second step is to think about this idea of interdependence. We are all connected, right? Every cause has a reaction. I don't think I said that right. Every action has a reaction. I think that's what I meant to say. Every cause has an effect. Maybe that's where I was going to. But so what is the context of the problem, right? So understanding how systems are combined, understanding that a lot of times there are many different causes that have created one problem, and there are many conditions. So it's usually not just like one thing in a bubble, right? There's a lot going on, interdependence. And actually Will gave a little highlight of a guest speaker. We're going to talk a little bit more about interdependence as well. So our third step is thinking about, what choices do I have? Okay, so now I understand, I'm thinking about, how do I alleviate suffering for others? What are the different understandings that I have about the situation? And now what choices do I have? And what are the outcomes of those choices? And then our fourth step is now going to be asking yourself, which solution can cause the greatest well-being, right? So I've identified maybe different solutions, but what is going to cause the least harm to the most people, or otherwise, what is going to cause the greatest amount of well-being for everyone involved? So those are so we talked about the 3 steps of compassion and feeling that yearning, right? Feeling the yearning, the motivation to take action. And then once we have the motivation, the other wing of the bird is using our discernment. And these are hopefully helpful steps to think yourself through the process, right? Am I really engaging with discernment, with wisdom in a way that is going to help everybody who is involved in such and such system? Because it is all intercombined and interdependent. I think with this, I'm passing back to you, Will. Is this right? Or do I have more? I forget what our next slide is.
I will take it from here. So thank you.
Okay, take it from here, Will.
And that three-legged stool of compassion, I think, is so important along with these 4 steps. So thank you for sharing that. Before we move on to our very special guest, Paige, if you could be my person, make sure my tech is working and let me know if it's not. But I encourage you to just find yourself in a comfortable position, feet flat on the floor so that you feel grounded. Allow your spine to hold you up so you're not squishing your organs. And we're going to engage in a practice together. We're going to hear from our speaker and move immediately into a visualization. So if your camera is on, you're welcome to turn it off. I'm going to try to do that with mine. It's kind of hard since we're sharing the screen, but just take a moment to listen, and we'll do this practice together.
It really boils down to this, that all life is interrelated. We are all caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny, and whatever affects one directly, yes, sir, affects all indirectly. We are made to live together because of the interrelated structure of reality. Did you ever stop to think that you can't leave for your job in the morning without being dependent on most of the world? You get up in the morning and go to the bathroom and reach over for the sponge, and that's handed to you by a Pacific Islander. You reach for the bar of soap, and that's given to you at the hands of a Frenchman. And then you go in the kitchen to drink your coffee for the morning, and that's poured in your cup by a South American. Or maybe you want tea, that's poured in your cup by a Chinese. Or maybe you are desirous of having cocoa for breakfast, and that's poured in your cup by a West African. And then you reach over for your toast, and that's given to you at the hands of an English-speaking farmer, not to mention the baker. And before you finish eating breakfast in the morning, you're dependent on more than half of the world. This is the way our universe is structured. It is its interrelated quality. We aren't going to have peace on earth until we recognize this basic fact of the interrelated structure of all reality.
And with that interrelated structure in mind, bring to mind as vividly as possible one of 3 people. Someone who is dear to you, such as a close friend or loved one, or a stranger, a real person whom you have seen before, perhaps someone you see regularly at your job or school or at a store you frequent, but feel neither close nor distant to or from them. Or third, bring to mind someone who has harmed you or with whom you have a difficult relationship. As you visualize this person in your mind, listen to this practice and repeat each line to yourself using that chosen person's name. This person has a body and a mind, just like me. This person has feelings, emotions, and thoughts, just like me. This person has, in their life, experienced physical and emotional pain and suffering, just like me. This person has at some point been sad, disappointed, angry, or hurt, just like me. This person has felt unworthy or inadequate, just like me. This person worries and is frightened sometimes, just like me. This person has longed for friendship, just like me. This person is learning about life, just like me. This person wants to be caring and kind to others, just like me. This person wants to be content with what life has given them, just like me. This person wishes to be free from pain and suffering, just like me. This person wishes to be safe and healthy, just like me. This person wishes to be happy, just like me. This person wishes to be loved, just like me. Because this person is a fellow human being, just like me. You can add a dedicatory wish or resolve statement as we close our practice. And together, breathing in deeply through the nose if possible, fully, and holding at the top, releasing completely. Let's return to our presentation. That Just Like Me practice is something I engage in intentionally, particularly with circumstances that are difficult or challenging. And I remind myself, this person is whatever that moment may be, just like me. And so as we close this lesson and this series, just want to highlight that compassion and discernment are not guarantees of a positive outcome or result, but together they provide the best path forward for individual and collective well-being. And as we've said before, if you want to be happy, practice compassion. If you want others to be happy, practice compassion. And so I'll stop my share and just want to open up if anyone has anything they'd like to offer or share or contribute to our session here. And Paige, anything else you'd like to add?
I would just like to say that that was extremely impactful and touched a very deep chord. I think that being raised a certain way to have compassion and have these thoughts, but Will and Paige, the constant reminder to realize you have to bring somebody else in and realize that they're also struggling and or dealing with things. And I think it's very easy in our day-to-day lives to miss that step. And so thank you both for bringing that back to center focus.